You cut eggs out of your breakfast, stopped eating red meat, replaced butter with margarine, and filled your pantry with whole grain crackers and fat-free products. You did what everyone said was the right thing. But when you opened your latest blood test results, the shock came. Your cholesterol didn't drop even a single point, or worse, your LDL went up and your triglycerides skyrocketed. The feeling of frustration is huge, isn't it? You feel like you're sacrificing the table, constantly denying yourself, and your body simply isn't responding. So why is clean eating in the traditional sense failing so many people? The truth that few people admit is that most natural cholesterol-lowering strategies are based on science from 50 years ago. Today, I'm going to show you the fatal mistake that 90% of people make when they try to fix their cardiovascular health on their own, and how this obsession with avoiding natural fats may actually be inflaming your arteries, disrupting your hormones, and draining your vital energy. Hello, I'm Dr. Harrison Blake. I'm a medical specialist with 15 years of clinical practice focused on longevity and the reversal of metabolic diseases. If you're tired of generic advice that only leaves you hungry and produces mediocre results, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to fix your strategy and put control of your health back in your hands. Go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. And comment below, what was the food you gave up with the most pain in your heart because you thought it was responsible for your cholesterol? The biggest mistake people make when trying to lower cholesterol naturally is what I call the calorie vacuum. When you decide, out of fear, to remove saturated fat from your diet, cutting out eggs, cheese, or meat, your body refuses to operate without energy. Unconsciously, you end up filling that gap with carbohydrates. You replace your omelet with whole grain bread, swap steak for a light pasta dish, or increase your intake of fruit and fruit juices, thinking that because they're natural, they must be harmless for your heart. The result? Your cholesterol might drop slightly on paper, but your cardiovascular health takes a dive. To understand why this is a disaster, you need to understand the role of insulin. When you consume these carbohydrates, even whole grains, your blood sugar rises and your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin doesn't just help move sugar into your cells. It's also the main switch that controls fat production in your liver. There's an enzyme called HMG-CoA reductase, which is exactly the target of cholesterol medications like statins. What activates this enzyme and tells your liver to produce cholesterol nonstop is not the fat you eat, it's high insulin. In 15 years of clinical practice, I've lost count of how many patients came into my office frustrated because their LDL wouldn't go down even while following a vegetarian or low-fat diet. The reason was clear. They were living in a state of hyperinsulinemia. By eating bread, tapioca, juices, and excessive grains, they kept insulin high all day long, essentially telling the liver to produce cholesterol internally. Remember, about 80% of the cholesterol in your blood is produced by your own body. It doesn't come from food. If you want to lower cholesterol naturally, you first have to turn off the factory, and the only way to do that is by controlling insulin. On top of that, replacing fat with carbohydrates creates the worst possible scenario for your arteries: increased glycation. As we discussed in previous videos, excess sugar in the bloodstream binds to proteins in your endothelium and your LDL, essentially caramelizing your circulatory system. You might even have an LDL of 110, which looks great on paper. But if that LDL is glycated and oxidized due to excessive carbohydrates, it can be far more dangerous than an LDL of 160 in someone whose body burns fat as fuel. The mistake of focusing on saturated fat while ignoring the impact of sugar and starch is what keeps people sick. Your body needs healthy fats to produce hormones, support brain health, and maintain cellular integrity. When you remove them and replace them with fast-absorbing energy sources, you're simply replacing a theoretical villain with a real and silent aggressor. To lower cholesterol in a healthy way, the focus should be on nutritional density, not punitive calorie restriction that raises stress and inflammation. The second fatal mistake when trying to lower cholesterol naturally is replacing natural saturated fats like butter, lard, or coconut oil with so-called refined vegetable oils. I'm talking about soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, and sunflower oil. For decades, the food industry convinced us that because these oils come from plants and contain no cholesterol, they must be the salvation for our arteries. On paper, they may even lower your LDL number, But the biological price you pay for that is extremely high and rarely discussed in medical offices. To understand the danger, you need to know that these oils are extremely rich in omega-6 polyunsaturated fats. Chemically speaking, these fats are highly unstable. They contain multiple double bonds that react with oxygen at the slightest exposure to heat, light, or processing. When these oils are extracted at high temperatures in factories and then heated again in your frying pan, they undergo immediate oxidation. You're not just eating fat. You're ingesting oxidation byproducts that damage your endothelium the moment they enter your bloodstream. In 15 years of medical practice, I've seen a clear pattern. Patients who replace butter with margarine or soybean oil often show elevated levels of systemic inflammation. Excess industrial omega-6 disrupts the balance with omega-3, creating a pro-inflammatory environment in the body. And here's the key point. LDL only becomes a real problem when it oxidizes. By consuming refined vegetable oils, you're giving your body exactly the fuel it needs to rust your LDL particles. A low LDL that's heavily oxidized because of these oils is far more dangerous than a higher LDL composed of stable, protected particles. On top of that, margarine and processed oils often contain traces of trans fats or interesterified fats, which are toxic to cellular function. They alter the fluidity of cell membranes and interfere with the communication of LDL receptors in your liver. In other words, you're trying to lower cholesterol with a product that actually damages the very machinery responsible for clearing it from your blood. It's a self-destructive cycle disguised as a healthy habit. To lower cholesterol intelligently, you must stop fearing the fats that humans have consumed for thousands of years and start fearing the fats created in laboratories over the last century. Stable fats like extra virgin olive oil, rich in protected polyphenol, and natural saturated fats do not oxidize easily and do not inflame your arteries. The focus of your cardiovascular health should not be merely reducing a number on a lab report at any cost, but ensuring that what circulates in your bloodstream is stable, functional, and incapable of igniting an inflammatory fire in your arterial walls. The third classic mistake people make when trying to lower cholesterol naturally is obsessing over LDL in isolation. It's very common for patients to come to my office proudly saying, "Doctor, I managed to lower my LDL from 160 to 110 with my new diet juices and whole grains." But when I look at the rest of the lab results, their triglycerides, which used to be 80, are now 190. What that patient doesn't understand, and what many professionals overlook, is that they traded a stable marker for one that signals very high metabolic risk. To understand why this is a serious mistake, you need to know that LDL is not a single entity. As we discussed in the video about lab tests, it can appear in two forms: large, fluffy particles, pattern A, or small, dense particles, pattern B. What determines which type you have in your blood is not the fat you eat. It's your triglyceride level. When triglycerides rise, which almost always happens in low-fat diets high in carbohydrates, they begin interacting with LDL particles, compressing them and turning them into small, dense particles that easily penetrate arterial walls. In 15 years of medical practice, I've seen that a patient with an LDL of 160 and triglycerides of 70 is usually far more protected than a patient with an LDL of 100 and triglycerides of 200. Why? Because the first patient has large particles that circulate and return to the liver without causing damage. The second has an army of ants, aggressive particles that oxidize easily and hide in tiny cracks in the arteries. By trying to lower LDL by cutting natural fats, you often raise triglycerides and worsen the quality of the particles that remain. You cleared the smoke, but you increase the fuel feeding the fire. High triglycerides are also the clearest signal that you may be developing fatty liver disease. A fatty liver loses its ability to process cholesterol efficiently. It becomes a vicious cycle. You follow the wrong version of a healthy diet, increase fructose and starch intake, inflame the liver, raise triglycerides, and ultimately destroy the functionality of HDL, the so-called good cholesterol. In the end, your natural efforts leave you with a much more atherogenic lipid profile than the one you started with. To lower cholesterol naturally with success, your first target should always be triglycerides. Ideally, they should be below 100 milligrams per deciliter, or at least close to a 1-to-1 ratio with your HDL. If you focus on lowering LDL, while sacrificing triglyceride levels. You're losing the war just to win a cosmetic battle on your lab report. True cardiovascular health is systemic. It requires balance among all the players. Cholesterol is only a passenger in a system that needs metabolic stability to function properly. The fourth classic mistake when trying to lower cholesterol naturally is focusing on supplements that only block fat absorption, such as fiber and phytosterols, while completely ignoring the minerals and vitamins that manage cholesterol and calcium logistics in the body. In 15 years of medical practice, I've seen people loading up on psyllium, oats, and bran hoping these fibers will carry cholesterol out of the body. While fiber plays a role in gut health, it only treats the superficial symptom and not the metabolic cause of plaque formation. The major oversight here is neglecting two essential conductors, magnesium and vitamin K2. When you try to lower cholesterol naturally, your ultimate goal shouldn't be just lowering the number in your blood. It should be preventing cholesterol from depositing in your arteries. Magnesium is essential for keeping cholesterol dissolved and preventing it from precipitating. Without sufficient magnesium, something very common in processed food diets, your blood becomes a more favorable environment for crystal formation and deposits. But the most serious mistake is the absence of vitamin K2, especially in its negative 7 Malawian Quatches form. As I explained in the video about arterial plaques, cholesterol only becomes a solid, dangerous obstruction when it calcifies. Vitamin K2 acts like a GPS that removes calcium from arteries and directs it into bones. If you focus only on fiber to lower LDL but are deficient in K2, the little cholesterol you have may still end up cemented into your coronary arteries by misplaced calcium. It's a half strategy. You remove some of the passengers but leave the biological concrete drying on the road. Another common mistake is the isolated use of phytosterols. They compete with cholesterol for absorption in the intestine and can indeed lower LDL levels in lab results. However, recent studies suggest that the accumulation of phytosterols in the blood may also be atherogenic in certain individuals. In other words, you replace your body's natural cholesterol with a plant compound that your system may not always know how to process. It's the classic case of treating the lab report instead of the patient's biology. For a natural strategy that truly protects your heart, you must stop looking only at what leaves the body, fiber, and start paying attention to what manages the system, micronutrients. Smart supplementation with high-quality omega-3 to reduce inflammation, along with vitamin D3 and K2 combined with magnesium, does far more for longevity than mountains of whole grain fiber that can irritate your gut. The secret isn't blocking cholesterol. It's giving your body the tools to know exactly what to do with every molecule circulating in your blood, to lower cholesterol naturally, and more importantly, to clean and protect your arteries. You need to stop fighting biology and start working with it. The first step on the right path is nutritional density. In 15 years of medical practice, I've seen that the body only stops producing excess cholesterol when it feels nourished and safe. When you follow restrictive starvation diets, your liver goes into survival mode and increases internal cholesterol production to ensure that your cell membranes don't collapse. The real strategy begins with monounsaturated fats. Extra virgin olive oil is your greatest ally. Not only does it help balance your lipid profile, but it is loaded with polyphenol that act as a shield against LDL oxidation. By consuming olive oil, avocados, and nuts such as walnuts and almonds, you provide your body with stable fats that signal satiety and reduce systemic inflammation. These fats do not raise insulin levels, which, as we've seen, is the key to turning off excessive cholesterol production in the liver. The second pillar is controlling glycemic load through high-quality proteins. Contrary to popular belief, responsibly sourced red meat, eggs, and fish are not the villains. They provide choline, zinc, vitamin B12, and essential amino acids that your liver needs to process fats. The mistake is not eating steak. The mistake is eating steak alongside a mountain of white rice, French fries, and a glass of orange juice. When you focus on protein and low-starch vegetables such as broccoli, cauliflower, and spinach, you keep your baseline insulin levels low. This allows your body to use stored fat as fuel, naturally reducing triglycerides and improving LDL particle quality. Another powerful and often overlooked tool is intermittent fasting. Fasting is not only about weight loss, it's about cellular cleanup, a process called autophagy. During fasting hours, Your body performs a sweep of old and damaged lipoproteins. Fasting dramatically improves insulin sensitivity, delivering a final blow to the production of small, dense LDL particles. Even starting with a simple 12 or 14-hour fasting window can work wonders for your lipid profile without requiring you to starve or count calories. Finally, we cannot forget hydration and bioactive compounds. Teas rich in catechins, such as green tea, and the consumption of cruciferous vegetables help the liver in its detoxification phases. When your liver is clean and efficient, it manages cholesterol perfectly. The right path is not about what you remove from your plate out of fear, but about what you add to nourish your cells. It's about replacing the dirty energy of refined carbohydrates and industrial oils with the clean energy of natural fats and nutrient-dense proteins. When you do this, you're not just lowering a number on paper. You're rebuilding your entire cardiovascular system from the inside out. We've reached the end of this lesson, and now you understand why so many natural attempts fail. Focusing only on cutting fat is like trying to dry the floor without turning off the faucet of insulin and inflammation. Your plan for the next 30 days is simple but powerful. First, eliminate the Trojan horses. Remove all refined vegetable oils from your kitchen and replace them with olive oil or butter. Second, drastically reduce refined carbohydrates and sugar. Remember, high insulin is what tells your liver to manufacture cholesterol nonstop. Third, focus on nutritional density. Eat eggs, quality meats, and plenty of low-starch vegetables. Don't forget the conductors. If possible, supplement with magnesium and vitamin K2 to ensure that calcium and cholesterol don't end up fighting against your arteries. In just 4 weeks following this strategy, the quality of your LDL particles will change, your triglycerides will drop dramatically, and your HDL will once again function as an efficient cleaner. I'm Dr. Harrison Blake, and in 15 years of medicine, I've learned that the biggest mistake isn't lack of willpower, it's lack of the right information. If this content gave you the clarity you were missing, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with a friend or family member who is constantly struggling with cholesterol without seeing results. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. I accept the 30-day challenge. Your heart deserves a strategy based on biological truth, not outdated myths. See you in our next meeting.